She just wanted to finish her shift until the billionaire's son held her hand and, before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching this story from? I love knowing how far these love stories are reaching. And if you like intense stories, full of emotion and endings that warm your heart, subscribe to the channel. It really helps the channel grow and motivates me to bring even more stories made to touch your soul. Shall we go on this journey together? The cleaning cart slid smoothly down the silent hallway of the 28th floor of the Whitford Grand, the most luxurious hotel in Chicago. The walls, lined with imported silk wallpaper, reflected the amber glow of the crystal chandeliers, and the air smelled of expensive lavender and controlled silence. Ava Morales, in a spotless uniform, her hair pulled into a tight bun and her face serene, stopped in front of the presidential suite door. Her gold name tag gleamed on her left pocket. Ava M. Housekeeping. She took a deep breath. That floor was reserved for the most powerful, unreachable guests. There was no room for mistakes. She carefully turned the doorknob. The room was dim, but clean. What caught her attention was the boy sitting near the large window overlooking Lake Michigan. The afternoon sun streamed through the glass, casting golden lines across the beige carpet. He was there, motionless, alone. His very light blonde hair fell over his forehead, and his small shoulders seemed hunched. He looked about 8 years old, but the way he isolated himself in the corner made him seem younger. Pale as marble, he wore a white shirt and neatly pressed grey slacks. His hands rested on his knees, his blue eyes fixed on some invisible point outside. Ava recognized Ethan Whitford. He was the billionaire's son, the boy who, as the whispers went, had stopped speaking since he lost his mother. She hesitated. She had orders to be discreet, almost invisible, but something in her wouldn't let her ignore him. She picked up the cleaning spray and walked to the desk nearby, keeping her distance. As she carefully wiped it down, she spoke in a low, gentle voice, almost like she was singing so she wouldn't scare him. "Excuse me, is it okay if I clean just over here, sweetheart?" He didn't answer, didn't even turn his head, but when she stepped back slightly, he stood up, slowly, like waking from a trance. He took 2 steps. Ava paused, surprised. Ethan stopped in front of her. His eyes, so sad and deep, lifted to meet hers. Without saying a word, he held out his hand. Ava, unsure, looked around. No one else was there. Then, he took her hand. It was a light touch. Cold, small, but firm. Ava's heart raced. Time seemed to freeze. She looked at that boy, and he finally looked back. Truly. For the first time in months, someone saw him, and he allowed himself to be seen. She slowly knelt down to his level. "Hey. Are you okay?" Ethan's eyes shimmered with the faintest trace of moisture. No words, just that gesture, a broken boy, finding refuge in the hand of a stranger. Outside the suite, someone watched unnoticed. Liam Whitford, the father, had returned from an urgent call and stopped before the half-open door. What he saw left him frozen. The maid. The woman with light brown skin and delicate features kneeling before his son. And the boy, who hadn't let anyone touch him since his mother's funeral, holding her hand as if it was the only thing keeping him breathing. Liam's jaw tightened. His gaze hardened. He didn't understand. And for now, he didn't want to. But something had started there. Something that neither he, nor Ethan, nor Ava could control anymore. Ava slowly stood up, still feeling Ethan's small hand in hers. He wouldn't let go. It was as if that silent gesture was the only thread connecting him to the world. But the silence was broken by the sharp sound of firm footsteps on the marble floor. The door to the presidential suite opened fully, revealing the imposing figure of Liam Whitford. Tall, dark blonde hair slicked back, tailored navy blue suit, unshakable expression. His greyish-blue eyes, so much like his son's, now burned with something colder than surprise. Ava stepped back immediately. She let go of Ethan's hand, who hesitated but didn't resist. She straightened her posture, lowered her gaze, and stepped back, trying to maintain composure. "Mr. Whitford, I'm sorry, I didn't know that—" She tried to explain, her voice low, but he cut her off with a sharp tone. "What exactly are you doing here with my son?" She swallowed hard. The boy, still beside her, discreetly tugged at the hem of her blouse, but Ava didn't move. She knew every gesture now could be misunderstood. I was just cleaning the room. He came to me. I didn't—" "He doesn't talk to anyone, let alone touch anyone. And you expect me to believe this just happened by chance?" The tension in the room was suffocating. Ethan, silent, looked at his father with wide eyes. He seemed to want to say something, but his mouth remained closed. Fear of his father, maybe. Or just the habit of silence. Ava felt her face flush, but she held her ground. She was used to being judged, for where she came from, for the uniform she wore, for the last name she carried, but never for something she had done from the heart. "I understand your concern, but I didn't do anything except respect his space." Liam held her gaze, unblinking. He seemed to weigh every word like it was a threat. At last, he simply nodded, coldly. "You may leave now." Ava gave a slight bow, as protocol required, and left the room with a heavy chest. As soon as she crossed the doorway, her chin trembled. It wasn't just from humiliation. It was from the pain she'd seen in that boy's eyes, and the wall his father had just built between them again. Hours later, already in the employee locker room, Ava was called into the management office. The closed door, the muffled sound of the city outside, and in front of her, the operations manager, a pale, bald man with a tired expression, handed her a paper with the hotel's seal. Mr. Whitford requested this be formalized. A verbal warning, for now. Ava read the words calmly. Improper conduct, inappropriate closeness with underage guest. "I didn't touch him. He came to me." "I know, Ava, but you know how it is. The father owns the hotel, and what he says is what matters." She closed her eyes for a moment. The shame burned inside, but it was her mother's name that came to her mind. She couldn't afford to lose that job. "One more thing," the manager continued, without lifting his eyes. "From now on, avoid any interaction with the boy. Keep your distance." Ava nodded slowly. She folded the warning notice carefully and put it in her pocket. "Understood." On her way out of the office, she passed by a mirror. The reflection showed a young woman in a plain uniform, tight bun, but her eyes, despite the fatigue, carried determination. She took a deep breath, lifted her chin, and went back to her shift. But inside, something had changed. It wasn't anger. It was something deeper. She knew that story wasn't over yet, and she also knew that no matter how hard they tried to silence it, there are bonds that even power can't control. In the days following the warning, Ava tried to do exactly as she was told. She avoided the 28th floor, changed her hallway routes, and even controlled where she looked whenever little Ethan passed by, escorted by a different nanny each time, each colder than the last. But the boy didn't seem to accept the distance. He started showing up in the most unexpected places. One time, Ava was collecting towels at the spa when she saw him standing at the glass door, his eyes fixed on her like he was waiting. Another time, he appeared in the staff cafeteria silently, while the nanny was distracted talking on the phone. No one understood how he kept slipping away from supervision, but there he was, always looking for her. And the most alarming part for the hotel staff, Ethan stopped eating. He refused to swallow anything unless Ava was on the same floor. He'd throw his plates on the floor, cry silently, refuse to sleep. Ava knew. She could feel it. She carried in her chest the guilt of someone who didn't want to cause trouble, but couldn't ignore the look in that lost boy's eyes. One evening, as she left the locker room, she was approached by a front desk worker. "Mr. Whitford asked that you come up to the penthouse. Right now." Ava's heart froze. By the tone in the woman's voice, it sounded final. Maybe the end. She went up in silence. The glass-paneled elevators reflected her face, the tired expression, the slightly red eyes, the plain, clean uniform. The penthouse floor was eerily quiet, with dark wood floors and a sophisticated woody scent. A well-dressed assistant opened the door. "He's waiting." Ava walked in. Liam Whitford's office was spacious, modern, with glass walls and half-drawn dark curtains. He stood by the window, looking out at the lit-up city. He wore a white shirt, no tie, sleeves rolled up to his forearms. He looked less rigid than before, but still just as unreachable. "He doesn't talk to anyone." The words came out low, almost like a confession. "Not to therapists, not to his aunt, but with you, he just changes." Ava kept her gaze steady. She knew better than to speak without being asked. But he continued. "I fired the nanny today. She was incompetent and dangerous." He turned slowly. There was something new in his eyes, a mix of frustration and surrender. "I need you to stay close to him, temporarily, as a companion. Nothing more. Just be around." Ava hesitated. She knew what that meant and what it would cost to accept. "And the hotel?" "It'll be a private arrangement, outside of the staff structure." He opened a drawer and tossed an envelope with documents onto the desk. "Confidentiality agreement, a more dignified salary." She stepped forward slowly, hands trembling, opened the envelope. The amount was high, more than she'd earn in months as a maid. "I can help my mother with this," she murmured, barely realizing she said it out loud. "I'm not offering charity," he snapped. "I'm hiring out of necessity." Ava nodded, swallowing her pride. "And what if he gets attached?" Liam took a deep breath. For a second, he looked more like a man than a mogul. "I'm not thinking long-term. I'm just trying to make my son live today," she signed. The next morning, when Ethan saw her walk into the private breakfast room, he dropped his toy and ran to her, wrapping his arms tightly around her waist. A simple gesture, but one that made all the nearby staff freeze. Liam watched in silence, fists clenched. For the first time, maybe, he wasn't sure he was in control, and he had no idea that the contract, meant to solve a problem, would end up digging up pain far deeper than he was ready to face. Ava could feel it. This wasn't just a job. It was the beginning of something impossible to predict, and something about to spiral completely out of control. The atmosphere in the penthouse felt different that morning. Ethan, holding Ava's hand, walked into the hotel's art gallery with light steps, as if the silent space were their secret park. He could already smile, even if shyly. With each simple gesture, choosing a juice flavor, pointing at a modern sculpture, he showed signs that the world was beginning to pulse around him again. Liam watched from a distance. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, but his gaze had lost some of its usual coldness. Seeing his son engage, even for minutes, was a relief, a kind of peace he hadn't felt in years. That evening, the hotel would host a charity gala to raise funds for children with developmental disorders. The board had insisted Liam attend, and reluctantly, he brought Ethan. The boy only agreed to get out of the car when he saw Ava waiting at the side entrance. "You're coming too?" he asked softly, without looking at her. She smiled. "If you want me to." He nodded, and that was enough. During the cocktail, Ava stayed on the sidelines, as was her nature. She wore a simple black dress, borrowed from a friend in the hotel laundry. Modest, elegant. Her hair was in a low bun, her makeup subtle. Even so, her beauty stood out. Liam, for his part, seemed more at ease. He allowed Ava and Ethan to sit together during dinner. At one point, Ethan rested his head on her shoulder. The click of a camera, unnoticed by anyone, captured the moment. The next morning, chaos erupted. Gossip sites ran the image as scandal. Sensational headlines spread. Maid wins the heart of the billionaire heir. New stepmom in sight? Affection or ambition? On X, formerly Twitter, mentions exploded. Cruel comments flooded the hotel's posts. She cleaned the penthouse floor. Now she wants to clean out the bank account too. It's always a girl in uniform who throws herself at them. Classic. Latina woman, humble background, obviously an emotional scam. Ava read in silence on her friend's phone. She was in the women's locker room, sitting on the wooden bench. Her hands trembled. When she walked into the staff cafeteria, the room fell silent. Some turned their faces. Others whispered while staring at her. In the hallway, the supervisor avoided her gaze. In the elevator, the concierge ignored her. Later, trying to keep her head high, she was called to management. The same manager from before, now with a colder expression. "Order from the president," he said, handing her an envelope. "As of today, you are suspended indefinitely. Reason: improper exposure of the company's image." "It was just a photo, and I didn't even know it was taken," Ava replied, her voice shaky. "I didn't post it." "It doesn't matter. The fallout is out of control. Mr. Whitford said he'll handle the crisis personally." Ava took the envelope without protest. Her eyes held no anger, only disappointment. Deep, lonely disappointment. She left the building through the service door, a small backpack on her shoulders. No one saw her go. Not Liam. Not Ethan. Hours later, Liam returned to the penthouse and was informed. "What do you mean she left?" he asked, his voice tense. "Miss Morales didn't want to leave any contact. She only said it was for the best." Liam walked to his son's room. Ethan was sitting in the armchair, staring at the door as if waiting for someone. When his father entered, he didn't say anything. He just turned his face away, and the tears slid down in silence. That's when Liam felt, for the first time, that maybe he had gotten everything wrong. And out there, while the world kept commenting about the girl in the photo, Ava was disappearing into the city streets, with a silence louder than any post. The routine inside the penthouse had returned to silence. But it wasn't the same silence as before. It was heavier, darker. Ethan didn't speak. He barely ate. He slept poorly. He spent hours in front of the presidential suite's window, watching the city move below, as if waiting for something that wouldn't return. Liam tried to convince himself that suspending Ava had been the right decision. He had to protect the family name, the company image, the investors. But even he didn't believe it. He felt a restlessness he couldn't explain. And he was tired of watching his son waste away in silence. One night, as he opened his laptop to review financial reports, Liam stopped. He looked at the screen without really seeing it. He was tired of spreadsheets, numbers, crisis management strategies. Ava's image wouldn't leave his mind. Not the scandalous photo, but the one in the staff cafeteria, when she smiled at Ethan with genuine tenderness. He sighed, closed the file, and typed her name into the hotel's internal system. Ava Morales' employee record popped up in seconds. He read it carefully, as if he were learning about someone he had never really known. High school graduate with honors, night technical courses, no unexcused absences, always well reviewed by supervisors. And at the bottom of the report, an old comment from a former manager. Extremely ethical employee, quiet but committed to those around her. Liam frowned. He opened the personal notes section. There, he found a document attached by Ava months earlier, a carefully written request to change shifts. I need to take care of my mother in the mornings. She's in palliative care. I can work any night shift. Liam felt a tightness in his chest. He didn't know. He had never cared to know. Further down, more records. Ava had dropped out of nursing school because she couldn't afford the tuition. Still, she made small monthly donations to a local NGO called Roots of Hope, an organization that supported immigrant children in vulnerable situations. He sat still in front of the screen for several minutes. He didn't say anything, just absorbed the truth that had never been spoken out loud, but now screamed at him. He picked up his phone, hesitating. Opened the call history, looked for her number, but there wasn't one. He had never even saved it. How can someone so close disappear so easily? He murmured to himself. In the room next door, he heard a soft noise. He walked to the half-open door and saw Ethan on the floor, drawing with crayons on the carpet. Liam silently approached and knelt beside his son. The drawing showed 3 figures: a tall man in a suit, a woman in a simple dress, and a boy holding hands with both. At the top of the page, written in shaky letters, were the words, "Happy Home." "You miss her, don't you?" Liam asked. Ethan didn't respond, but his tear-filled eyes said everything. That night, Liam didn't sleep, and the next morning, he cancelled all meetings and calls. He sat alone in his office and stared at a single phrase written on the glass board in front of him. To judge without knowing is to lose what truly matters, and what he had lost might never come back. 2 days had passed since Liam saw the drawing Ethan had made. That simple image, made with childlike strokes, wouldn't leave his mind. A woman in a simple dress, a smiling boy, and him. For the first time, he saw himself not as a CEO, but as a father, and as a man who had lost more than he could measure. He made up his mind to find her. It only took a few hours to go through public records and find out where Ava was. She was no longer a hotel employee. She had returned to night shifts as a caregiver at a public hospital in the south of the city. The kind of hospital his family never had to set foot in. Where fluorescent lights flicker, the hallways smell of cheap disinfectant, and silence is only broken by groans of pain or muffled cries in the middle of the night. Liam entered with Ethan beside him. The boy, curled into his own jacket, clutched his father's hand, but his eyes were alert. He was looking for someone. In room 215, an elderly woman was coughing, while Ava, dressed in a light blue uniform and a white coat, adjusted a blanket over her legs. Her hair was tied up, the dark circles under her eyes deeper, but her posture, the same. Steady, attentive, human. Liam paused at the door, hesitant. He didn't know how he'd be received, and deep down, maybe he knew he didn't deserve anything. Ava turned to grab a clipboard, and then she saw him. Her eyes cut through him like glass. No expression on her face, no movement, no words. She simply continued what she was doing, as if he were invisible. Liam cleared his throat, trying to find his voice. I needed to see you." "Nothing." "It's important." She looked at him again, but there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. indifference. He felt more pain in that lack of response than he would have if she had shouted at him. "I didn't come to convince you of anything. I just wanted—" That's when Ethan let go of his father's hand. With slow steps, he crossed the small room. Ava saw him approaching but didn't move. He stopped just inches from her. His blue eyes were full of tears, his lips trembling. For a moment, everything froze. Then, he spoke. "Don't go!" Ava gasped, her eyes filled with tears. The sound of Ethan's voice, weak but audible, echoed like a drumbeat in her chest. "Don't go," he repeated, firmer. "Please." It was the first time she had heard his voice. The first time since the boy's mother had passed. She knelt slowly, pressed her forehead against his, and closed her eyes, holding his small hands tightly. Neither of them said anything else. But it was as if everything had already been said. Liam, standing in the doorway, took a deep breath. And there, in that worn, cold corridor, he finally understood that not all forgiveness needs words. Sometimes, it begins with an 8-year-old child asking for what no adult ever offered: to stay. The reunion with Ethan had shaken Ava's certainty. She didn't say she would return, didn't promise anything. But that night, after her hospital shift, she went to her mother's small apartment and sat in silence for hours, staring at the peeling walls and the nearly empty box of medicine. Across the city, Liam stayed in his penthouse. For the first time in weeks, he slept. Not well, but he slept. The sound of Ethan's voice still echoed in his mind. He believed that, slowly, things might start to fall into place. But in Liam Whitford's world, nothing stayed simple for long. The next morning, the call came early. The name on the screen made him sigh before he even answered. "Patricia," his stepmother's voice cut through the phone like a blade. "Darling, what a beautiful image. Your son hugging the caregiver. It reached me through the board group. 1 Hearts and annoyed shareholders." "I don't have time for this kind of irony," Liam replied curtly. "Then I'll be direct. You're going to cut off this relationship with that woman immediately." Liam stayed silent. "You know what's at stake," she went on. "The Whitford name is tied to millions in funding. Our image has been built with great effort, and you're about to throw it all away for a maid with sweet eyes." "She's not that," he muttered. "Oh, Liam, you're the CEO of an empire, and you're about to mix our bloodline with someone who cleans toilets. If you keep going, I'll open that box you fear so much, the one that involves your father, and the hospital we've been funding for years with resources you don't want made public." Liam closed his eyes. He felt his blood pressure rise. That old, veiled threat now came down like a sentence. "You're blackmailing me. I'm saving you from public ruin. End it now, or I'll end it for you." Hours later, Ava got a message asking to meet in the square across from the hospital after her shift. It was cold. The wind smelled like rain. She wore a worn grey coat and a dark scarf wrapped around her neck. He arrived with his hands in his pockets, no usual suit, just a dress shirt and the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Are you okay?" she asked, wary. "Ethan, how is he?" Liam took a while to respond. His face looked carved from stone. His eyes were empty. "It was a mistake." Ava frowned. "What was? What happened between us? This closeness, the bond, all of it. It was a mistake." She stepped back. "Are you talking about your son or about me?" Liam looked down. "Both." Ava felt her legs weaken. For a moment she thought she'd misheard. But he didn't say anything else, didn't try to explain, didn't fight. "I was a problem for your reputation, is that it?" He didn't answer. "You came to me. You brought your son. You made me promise I wouldn't leave, and now you look at me like I'm a burden." She waited, maybe for an apology, a pause, anything. But nothing came. Liam turned his back and walked to the car, as if he were just ending a contract. Ava stood there, frozen, as the first drops of rain began to fall. Inside, something collapsed. And for the first time since she started working at that hotel, she felt used. With her eyes on the wet ground, Ava whispered to herself, "I knew it was too good to last, but I didn't think it would hurt this much." The rain didn't stop in the days that followed. It drizzled over Chicago like the sky was mourning something no one could name. At the Whitford penthouse, silence once again took over every room. But this time, it was different. Ethan wasn't just quiet. He avoided his father, refused to eat, and spent hours sitting by the door, as if waiting for someone to come back. Liam tried to convince himself that he'd done what was necessary, protecting the family, the shareholders, the reputation. Everything was under control, except his son. On the fourth night, after breaking things off with Ava, Liam fell asleep on the office couch. When he woke, it was past 7. The nanny was in a panic. "Ethan! He's not home!" Liam's blood ran cold. "What do you mean he's not home?" "I just went to get my charger from the bedroom. When I came back, the door was slightly open. The guard thought it was you leaving with him." Within seconds, Liam activated security, police, driver, cameras. Nothing. The boy had vanished. On the other side of the city, in a modest housing complex in South Chicago, the doorbell rang on a small apartment. Ava opened it quickly, thinking it was the neighbor. But what she saw took her breath away. Ethan, coat soaked, shivering from head to toe, carrying only a little backpack, looked up at her like he had finally made it home. "How did you get here?" Ava asked, kneeling down immediately. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" "I ran away," he whispered. "I just wanted to stay here." Ava hugged him without thinking. The boy wrapped his arms tightly around her. Then, from the living room, Ava's mother appeared, thin, with grey hair and a scarf around her neck, leaning on a cane. "Sweetheart, you're freezing," she said, guiding him gently to the couch. She wrapped him in a blanket and held his hand. Ethan looked at her with watery eyes. Then, suddenly, he said, "You're like my mum, too." Ava's mother covered her mouth, touched. Ava blinked fast to hold back tears. She knew this was more than a sentence. It was redemption. Outside, a neighbor filmed the scene with a cell phone. A woman in a simple uniform welcoming a child of the elite into her small home with no cameras, no luxury. Only love. Minutes later, black cars pulled up on the street. Liam jumped out of the back seat as soon as he saw the building. He was breathless, hair a mess, expression wild. When Ava opened the door, he froze. Ethan was on the couch, between Ava and her mother, his face calm. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't crying either. He just looked at peace. "Why did you do this?" Liam asked his son, kneeling in front of him. "Why did you run away?" Ethan looked up. The answer came with the same firmness as before. "Because here, no one sends me away." Liam looked down. He was the one, after all, who had sent away the only person bringing light into his son's life. The next day, the video of the visit went viral. The caption was simple. "The Whitford heir ran away to find the heart the world rejected." The comments came in waves. She wasn't an opportunist. She was the only one who truly saw him. A maid teaching the elite what love really means. And the father, finally learning what it is to lose. This time, Ava wasn't attacked. She was defended, celebrated. The public, who had once humiliated her, now stood up to protect her. And at the top of the tower where the Whitfords lived, surrounded by gold, Liam watched it all in silence. He realized the boy he had raised behind walls had just torn them all down. The video of Ethan kept spreading like wildfire. TV shows, newspapers, influencers, everyone was talking about the billionaire's son running away to the humble neighborhood of a former maid. The public, who once pointed fingers at Ava, now saw her as a symbol of true affection in a cold and calculated world. Inside the glass building that housed the Whitford Group headquarters, the atmosphere was different, tense. Executives rushed through the halls, shareholders demanded answers, and Liam stood at the eye of the storm. He walked slowly down the executive corridor, this time without a suit. Just a light blue shirt, with the sleeves rolled up, no blazer, no tie, no armor. He entered the boardroom, where the board members were already waiting. Patricia, his stepmother, sat at the head of the table, arms crossed with forced elegance. Liam looked around and spoke in a steady but calm voice. "Before any decisions are made, I have something to say." He turned on the projector and displayed a series of documents. Altered contracts, coerced employees, funds funneled into fake philanthropic projects, everything documented, every line signed by family members, including Patricia. For years I turned a blind eye. Pretended not to see what was being done in the name of growth. But my son taught me something you all forgot. The truth doesn't need to be convenient to exist. The room shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Patricia pressed her lips together, trying to stay composed. "I'm stepping down from the presidency temporarily," Liam continued. "But before that, I'm turning all these documents over to the public prosecutor's office, and I'm taking responsibility for everything I stayed silent about." "You're going to destroy the family name," Patricia shouted, standing up. "No, I'm trying to save it," he replied, meeting her gaze firmly. "Maybe for the first time." Without waiting for more reactions, Liam turned off the projector, grabbed the folder with the originals, and left the room. He walked out of the building without bodyguards. No armored car, just a grey hoodie and a weight in his eyes that wasn't physical. It was moral. Hours later, he knocked on the door of Ava's small apartment. She opened slowly, dressed simply, hair tied back, dark circles under her eyes, her expression cautious. "Are you lost?" she asked, with restrained bitterness. "Yes," Liam replied. "For a long time." She said nothing. "I didn't come with prepared apologies, or flowers, or promises." He took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on her. "I just came to say I was wrong, that I was a coward, that I was afraid of losing an empire. And in the process, I almost lost the only place where my son ever truly smiled." The silence between them was thick, but there was no hostility, only open wounds trying to figure out if they could still heal. "I'm not the man you met at the top of that hotel," he said, his voice trembling. "Today, I'm just a father, and a man who needs to ask you for forgiveness." Ava watched him for a long moment, the kind of silence that weighs more than any scream. Then she stepped away from the door. "You can come in," she said, "but only as someone willing to listen." And when he crossed the threshold of that humble home, it was as if, for the first time, he was truly coming home. From that night, when Liam walked into Ava's apartment without promises or security, something began to change. It wasn't fast, it wasn't easy, but it was real. For weeks he showed up unannounced, sometimes bringing dinner, other times just to listen. Ava didn't give in right away. She had learned that trust isn't rebuilt with pretty words, but with quiet consistency. And it was Ethan who stitched the first invisible threads between them. The boy started smiling more. He drew pictures of Ava in his notebooks, added her mother to the portraits of family. And one day, when Ava came home from the hospital exhausted, she found an anonymous letter on the table with a full scholarship for her to return to nursing school. She cried silently. Only realized who had done it when she found a crayon drawing inside the envelope. 3 hearts and the letter E drawn with small hands. Was it him? She asked Liam days later, holding the paper. Liam gave a small smile. I think he already knows where to invest his love. Over time, Ava returned to school. She split her time between her hospital internship and classes. Liam, now away from the presidency, got involved with social projects, especially those that had once been used as facades. He wanted to turn what used to be cover-ups into truth. Ethan, meanwhile, was a different child, more talkative, more confident, and most of all, happier. A year passed. In a simple garden on the outskirts of Chicago, surrounded by close friends, former hospital co-workers, and a few kids from the NGO Ava supported, an intimate but deeply emotional ceremony was held. The altar was made of wildflowers and light wood. Ava wore a modest white dress made of soft fabric, her hair down in natural waves. She was as beautiful as ever, but now glowing from within. Liam waited for her in a light blue suit, nothing fancy, just with his heart in his hands. Behind him, Ethan, in a grey blazer, rosy cheeks, and shining eyes, held a small wooden box. When it was time for the rings, he walked carefully toward them. He handed them over with trembling hands and whispered to Ava, "You're not going to leave anymore, right?" She knelt down and hugged him tight, tears falling silently. We're staying now, together. As Liam said his vows, he looked into her eyes with conviction, but also with the humility of someone who had learned the hard way, the value of listening before judging. You taught me that love isn't forced, Ava. It's recognized, it's earned, and it's cared for. Thank you for giving me a second chance, when even I didn't think I deserved one. She smiled, eyes glistening. And you showed me that even those born at the top can learn how to come down, not by falling, but by choosing to. The exchange of rings was followed by a soft kiss, wrapped in applause and emotional smiles. At the end of the ceremony, Ethan ran across the grass with the other kids, laughing like never before. Ava watched from a distance, her head resting on Liam's shoulder. He's happy, she said. Liam nodded. He learned what I took too long to understand. And what was that? He looked at her with tenderness. That sometimes love only begins when judgment ends. Now tell me, what did you think of this story? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and tell me which part touched you the most. If you enjoyed it, like the video, share it with someone who needs this message, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. And before you go, I've picked another moving story that will touch your heart even more. You won't want to miss it.